Good evening, everyone. This is Brenda Meller with Meller Marketing, and we are going live on LinkedIn and live on Facebook. And I invited a special guest to join me here tonight, Scott Wyckoff. When I originally scheduled the session with Scott, this was probably, a month or two back, and the world was pretty normal back then. And I reached out to Scott a couple days ago, and I said, a lot of things have changed, and I have had a couple other interviews that we've decided to postpone for a little bit. But I thought that this topic was so relevant given what's happening here in the world today. And the topic we're going to be talking about is a SWOT analysis, and Scott's going to add some insights here into his thoughts on the subject here. So I'm just waiting right now for the live stream to come up on LinkedIn, and then I'm going to introduce Scott and we're going to get started. For those of you who are joining us, whether you're live on Facebook or live joining us on LinkedIn, if you could give us a like and also give us a comment. Let us know where in the world that you're watching from, and we'll be beginning in just a moment here. So it looks like the stream is starting to come up on LinkedIn, so I'm going to remove this here, and let's see if I can get Scott back up on screen here. Hey, Scott, how you doing today?
What's going on? Good evening. How you doing today, Brenda? And how's our audience doing?
Audience is doing good here. Let me just try to get a second. We're having a couple of hiccups. And for those that have joined me on these live streams in the past, you know that I do not make mistakes. When things happen, hiccups happen, things like that, we kind of roll with the punches and we learn a little bit as we go here. So I'm just trying to get Scott up on screen here so that you guys can see him, but it looks like it may not be letting me do that, Scott. So Scott, you might just be in audio, so the pressure's off of you at least to be up on screen.
I know. Yeah, no makeup. I'm pretty much, I hadn't shaved it today, so that maybe this is a good thing. At least they can see my photo, right?
Well, no, they can't unless I put the starting graphic.
Oh, okay, there you go. So now they got it. Now you can get it off there. Now,
yeah, there you go. Yeah. Well, at any rate, Scott, I just want to say welcome. I'm looking forward to our conversation here tonight, and I'm just going to invite people, if they have any questions as we're going throughout the session here today, to drop your comments below with any questions you have for Scott on the topic of SWOT analysis. And we were talking a little bit over the weekend before, kind of getting ready for this, Scott, and I said, people's minds are really focused on some big things that are happening in the world with this pandemic right now. And, it seems like we're in the United States, in Michigan, and it seems like over just the past 3 to 4 days, the conversation has really changed. And a lot of things have kind of, ground to a halt. In other areas, business as usual. But we know we're going into uncharted territories right now, and a lot of things are happening. And, you've always been a very intellectual thinker. You've always, brought great ideas to me through the past. And when we first set up this conversation, it was really just, let's talk about what a SWOT analysis is and how it can help businesses. But now we're in the midst of, a major force that's happening that we cannot control. And that's a threat of a pandemic. And it's no longer just a threat, it's a reality. It's something that's happening right now. So if you could, Scott, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your background, and then we'll jump right into the topic of the SWOT analysis. And I'm going to navigate your slides for you, Scott, so just let me know when you'd like to advance. And then I'll periodically jump in, Scott, and as we go throughout the conversation tonight. How's that sound?
That sounds awesome. Thank you very much. So my background, I spent some time in the financial services industry. I started out in the brokerage industry. I was at Oldie Discount back a long time ago. I'm not going to even mention how long ago that was. But it was, I was there probably for about 4 years. Then I went to Comerica. I was in the Global Trust Department, then Comerica Securities. And then I took it upon myself to try something really daring. I wanted to do straight commission sales as a bond salesman and slash trader. And that was a lot of fun. It was something that really made you dig deep in what it meant to try to build a business, market yourself, sell people on solutions that you can offer them. So I was calling on banks, insurance companies, portfolio managers, and a lot of that really tested your mettle in ways that I think a lot of people sometimes should have in order to get them some exposure to what it's like to really have to think on your feet in ways that you never thought you had. And then my last go around was in banking. I was at one of the local banks that are in the area here, And then there was an opportunity that came up from you and what you talked about with the yellow suits with the promotional marketing.
Yeah, that was your first entry into us working together, right?
Yep. So as a result, that was a lot of what started me down the road to working with Walsh, which is where I am currently. And a lot of the work that I do there is just trying to help students, do a lot of introspection with, where do they want to show value? How do they want to develop that value? And how do they then begin to articulate and let people know that, what they're doing for an organization is beneficial to that organization or even to their own business. And so that's why, so I've been at Walsh for roughly about 10 years, and I've been helping students and doing all types of things that relate to getting people involved with the work that they have a desire to push forward in. So that's where I am.
Awesome. And before we get into this conversation of our SWOT analysis, it looks like the comments have started to come in, and I'm actually, what I do, guys, is I pull up my phone to look at this live stream that's coming on LinkedIn, and I see that we've got 52 people joining us right now. And I'll just give a couple shout outs to those of you who are on. We have Lisa from Troy, Michigan. Welcome, Lisa. Lori Huber, good evening. Lori, nice to see you. Elizabeth Kloss is joining us from Michigan as well. Lisa Howes, hi, Brenda from Detroit, Michigan. I don't know, Scott, do you know Lisa?
What's her last name again?
Lisa Howes, H-O-W-Z.
Oh my goodness, yes. Yes. She's a Walsh grad too.
Yeah, so Lisa's joining us here. And then we've also got Christian Monk online from Michigan, and Nunsha is coming in from Michigan, and T. Goodhue. Everyone makes mistakes. I make learning experiences. I have little issues and hiccups that happen along the way, and we learn from them and learn from each other.
Exactly.
So Scott, you and I think we have a couple things in common. Not only did we work together, but we also both pursued our degrees at Walsh, and yes. I know this is part of the curriculum, what you're teaching students in classes. So let's jump in here and let's talk about, the SWOT analysis, and then let me know, Scott, I'll navigate your slides for you. So just let me know when you'd like me to move to the next slide.
Okay, great. So you can move forward to the next slide. So as you can see, it takes a lot of little steps. The biggest myth is thought that giant steps actually exist, and I think the intent was really to make it so that people you realize that you have to start somewhere, and I think where you start is with yourself, and I think that's a hard thing to do. I can go and talk to a group of people and ask them when was the last time they did a personal SWOT analysis, which is really what this is. But I didn't have you title it accordingly because it still can apply to people who run their own businesses too.
Yeah.
But the thing is that you have to recognize how important it is to know who you are, how you add value, how you are valuable, so that no one can take that away from you. We always say that education is something that no one can take away from you. Well, I think that the power is in having self-education as well. And I think receiving a formal education and an informal education is what a lot of people need to really think about. And sometimes you need to know who you are, what you're about, why you matter, why you exist, and show that to the world through all the actions and all the things that you learn about, all the things that you measure, everything that involves.
Scott, if I could jump in here, one of our former colleagues, Jeremy Guth, so the great philosopher Jeremy Guth, I remember he once said that education, especially a degree, is something that once earned, the door always remains open. It's
exactly.
And that, a lot of positions will require a bachelor's degree or master's degree or things like that. And it's kind of that hurdle you need to go through. And it's not just a piece of paper. It's definitely the learning experience that you're going through. And it's the maturity, the responsibility, the critical thinking, all those things combined, right?
Right, exactly, yes. And I think it's not only it's taking that critical thinking and then using it to identify opportunities, but also to solve problems. And some of the slides that we're going to go through here are going to go into some of those ideas. And so if you want to advance to the next one.
Yep.
And so what you see with the SWOT analysis is really a basic 2-box matrix. A 4-box matrix that allows you to, you essentially you begin that process of asking yourself questions with the strengths and the weaknesses and you begin to ask questions of what's going outside with the opportunities and the threats. And this is, and you can see you're like, I put the person you right in the middle there, because what's important is how you begin to think about how an organization or how your own business and the customers that you deal with view what you do. And I think if you're always aware of that, it gives you an advantage that's stronger, even stronger than a competitive advantage, because you're not always working to compete with someone else. You're always working to compete with what's the next best version of yourself. And you know how tough that is to be able to do that. But it's really what it comes down to. If there is competition, you'll always think about ways to, skirt around that and get around that, because you have your own goals, you have your own opportunities that you're trying to create and build. And you do that in a manner by asking yourself some very impactful questions. So when you're thinking about what your strengths are, one thing to ask is really, it's very simple. What am I good at? And what skills have I acquired over the years? Now, what I typically tell people, you want to come up with about 25 strengths, 25 weaknesses. Because it really allows you to have a strong conversation. And as we advance through the slides, you're going to see some very small things that are going to relate. So as you see, I only set it up with the next slide that you saw. There was only 5 that you saw there. No, you're good. You're good. And so the SWOT analysis actually begins when you ask yourself the question, okay, so what am I good at? And what are the questions I need to ask myself that are impactful, that put butterflies in my stomach and get me to think a little bit more about how to answer it in a way so that when somebody does mention or they have a trigger of a conversation with you, you know exactly what it means to begin thinking about answering that question so that they know exactly what it's about. But the more important thing is that companies, people who are looking to hire you, customers that are looking to hire you, what they're looking for is you to help them solve problems that they have. And what skills and abilities and talents and knowledge that you have that can go into helping them solve those problems is really what begins that whole process of you creating value for people.
Okay. So let's talk about, I mean, you want to touch a bit on the strengths and weaknesses, because I think sometimes it can be easy to say, okay, here's my strengths, here's the things that I do well, but why is it important to talk about or to identify what those weaknesses are? Because most people, I don't know about you, Scott, but I hate sitting down and saying what I don't like about myself or where I feel like I'm falling short. But why is it important to keep those things in mind?
It helps you to make better decisions. It helps you to develop a strategy. It helps you to develop tactics. It helps you to know what your goals need to be in order to complement what you plan on trying to accomplish. And I think when you've taken the time out to write those ideas down and to write down what the strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and why they exist. So because you can go extremely deep with a SWOT analysis, because you can ask that question. Okay, so I know I'm more like, for example, for me, I know I'm a big picture kind of a person. So I know that that's a strength in my mind. I know I'm not detail oriented. I do love getting into the details on occasion, but it seems I care about the details more so after the fact than trying to get to what the details need to be. I'm the guy that, I can see the big picture. Okay, well, guess what? We need to go into the Chicago market now. How do we go about doing that? And what are the best ways for us to begin to approach that? And I can think about all the things. So we know that Chicago has, over 6 million people that are part of the population. We know that in comparison to Detroit, we know that they have a very vibrant lifestyle, and Detroit is catching up to that. However, at the same time, you want to begin to think about, okay, so if we're going to go into a market like this, what are our customers looking for? What are employers looking for if you're looking to move and take a position in the Chicago area? So those are some of the things you want to begin to look at, because it really kind of helps you to think a little bit more about having some, really I shouldn't say a little bit more, you think a lot about having some self-awareness.
Yeah.
And so if you know that you're unfamiliar with the territory, that's a weakness. If you know that you have very few contacts, that's a weakness. And all of those become things that you need to look at to make sure that you think about, okay, so what's the thing I need to do to counteract that? Get
Right.
to know people, get to know the area. What's the culture like? Can you go there and create opportunities from where there was no opportunities initially? Are there problems that aren't being solved, and are you doing the kind of things that relate to that? For example, would you do a survey on the Chicago market to help you begin to think about ways to solve those problems that they're looking to have solved? And then what's the approach you think will do it in a framework that people are working with, or with their own mental models that they're working with? Because that's another level. And that, mental models, remember that we learned that in our program.
Yeah, that was like what, management 501 or something.
Yeah, yes. You can go into deep territory about what a mental model is and how it kind of shapes somebody's thinking on how they look at the world and how they approach solving problems and identifying opportunities and how they take action on it.
So let's I mean, I want to kind of bring into the equation here. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, Scott, but bring into the equation here where we are in America right now and where we are in Michigan right now. I mean, like, our consciousness has just really shifted towards it's kind of a little bit more internal now, because it's something is impacting our society. We've got this pandemic that's happening. And, when I think about a SWOT analysis, I'm going to go back to the previous slide just for a second here, because I love the visual and how you kind of broke this out here. There's things that we can control, and those are our strengths and weaknesses to an extent, or at least we can identify what those are, strengths and weaknesses. And then there's things that we can't control, and those are the opportunities and threats. And, I love the example you gave where you're kind of looking at other markets and how they impact, and looking at your network and where you have connections and contacts. But, now businesses businesses and individuals and entrepreneurs and independent consultants like me, we're now in this mindset shift where individuals have now been kind of forced and brought into a conversation where we're now starting to look at, okay, last week where we were in terms of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats has now like done a complete 180, and or at least it's changed to some extent, and we're in a different place. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, is it too late to do a SWOT analysis if you're already in the midst of what's happening right now in America and Michigan and with your small business or large corporation, or should we still think about going through that process?
You go through, for example, I think the reason why I mentioned that you do a list of 25 items on your strengths and weaknesses is because you're trying to build and extrapolate more thinking from yourself than you think is necessary.
Okay.
So some of those weaknesses, and frankly, the crazier the idea, the better off it's going to be, because you're soon going to say, now pandemic can be added to every business that's out there in your weaknesses category, or it can be added to your threats category.
Right.
Or sometimes they say you shouldn't use them for both, but it's a little tough to think about how to do it. But the threats. So when you look, I should say this. So when you look at the threats, and you look at the weaknesses, the threats are going to obviously be the pandemic, because that's external to what you're dealing with. Right.
We can't control that. It's something that's happening to us. I mean,
exactly.
We can control to an extent through social distancing and hand washing and things like that. But the reality is it's rolling through right now. So
exactly. Yes. Yeah. And so the weaknesses are your ability to deal with pandemic, be it financial, emotional, intellectual, economically, socially. I mean, all of those become a factor in how you do it. And really where it will fall under would probably be business continuity.
Okay.
And for most people, it's a little different for professionals and individuals to think about it. I think for them to recognize how they would deal with that is just to look at themselves as a business and begin to use that as a way to help them make a decision based on, okay, I'm not necessarily a business, or if I want to look at myself as that, so what would I do if I did X, Y, and Z? And then to begin to think about the opportunities that come from that. Yeah. So if you need to have a larger amount of capital in reserve for being unable to do any business for like maybe 2 to 3 months, might be something you may want to use as a means to help you solve that problem. And that's where that's why you want to have a lot of things that you go over. the crazier some of these ideas are. I'm not talking about like alien abduction or things like that, but when you
on the scale of probability, I mean,
the probability, now if there's a probability of somebody being abducted by aliens, we got major problems going on. But I think that you really have to include things that relate to issues that we're dealing with in your threats, and to really dig deep on why those could affect you, and to add those to your list.
So let me ask a question for our audience, those that are watching, because I think we've got a couple more people that have popped on and are kind of joining us in here right now too. I'm curious, for the viewing audience, at what point did this pandemic, the coronavirus, did it really start to get on your radar? So that you started to think, this is going to impact my business, not the world, not the society and things like that around me. But when did you first start thinking, this is something I need to be starting to think about? And whether it was, I might have to work from home, or my kids might not be going to school, or I may need to, get health care, and I might not be able to be at work for a while. If you're looking at, what's happening in the rest of the world, and in China and Italy and other places, it's not a quick 1 week process. It seems to be a 6 to 8 week or more that organizations and people are faced with right now. So for me, I mean, it was, where are we at now? March. It was probably in January was when we first started hearing about it. And it was probably in February that, I started to kind of think, where might things be going? And for me, I don't get that corporate paycheck anymore. So it was like, I started to think in the back of my mind, okay, I need to maybe start thinking about curbing my expenses a bit, and thinking about, making sure that emergency fund is set there. But also my business, I do consulting and I do training, and I can shift easily from live to in person. So I did have a couple training sessions that were finishing off in late February, early March. And it was kind of like last week was, for me, it was last week, Wednesday, when things started getting canceled. And I had an early morning meetup on Thursday. And it was even like overnight Wednesday to Thursday. I'm like, should I cancel this or should we keep it? We kept it. But Thursday felt like the last hurrah. Like, this is going to be it for a little while until things start to settle down. So I'm curious, for those of you who are joining, I'm going to look at the comments now to see, when did you start to think about, this threat of the pandemic no longer being a threat, but that it was really going to impact your business? And I think we've had a couple more folks that have joined on the session so far, and there's a little bit of a lag in the comments that are coming up here. So while I'm waiting for the audience comments, Scott, what about for you? When did it first kind of come up on your radar that, this was going to be impacting you and your family and your workplace?
I didn't think too much of it until the first person that they mentioned was diagnosed in Washington. That's when I thought, okay, something's going on. The number, the 80,000 number, you don't want to say that it was, a small number, but it was a number that you didn't think a lot about until that one person ended up with that diagnosis of having the infection for COVID-19. And that's when I thought, okay, what's going to happen next? And then after that, it just began to snowball. And then you're at the mercy of what the media tells you. So I tell you, the only barometer that really gave me any indication that there was a serious concern was the stock market.
Okay.
That began to tell me some serious things were going on, when you've got the market going down almost 500 to 700 points in a day because of what the possibilities are with a major provider or supplier country suffering from something that obviously they've got it contained. Put that in quotes, but it's something that you can recognize was going to affect this. And so the stock market was the news. The guy with the illness was the first, but I really didn't think too much until the stock market kind of reflected its pricing for what could have happened, or what is going to happen, or is yet to happen.
It is where it's going through. So Lori mentioned 2 weeks ago, watching the financial world is a good barometer. She says she grew up in a rural environment, so she's always had at least 2 weeks of supplies on hand, things that she needs. So we're kind of similar. I've always kind of kept my pantry stocked. And I agree with you, Lori. I think when I first started hearing about this, in the back of my mind, I think everybody kind of felt the same way. This is not going to happen to us. This is not going to roll out here. It can't, because you can't even fathom that we're going to go through this. But I started,
Exactly.
when I was at the grocery store, I'd throw a couple of extra cans of soup, an extra bag of flour, extra bag of rice, little things here and there. I'm not, we didn't stockpile the TP like a lot of the people that are doing, but we always have a nice supply of it at home. So
right, exactly.
we didn't have to worry about that part of it. But, it's definitely something. I think we're all there now. And,
yes, we are.
The schools here in Michigan have, all the public schools have officially closed, starting officially, I think tomorrow's the first day, and I think we're off for the month, and then they've got spring break. So we're really off until mid-April at this point.
Yeah.
But I'm going to shift us back to the conversation, Scott, and there's a woman on here, Arasha. I believe she's a bachelor's student, if I'm not mentioned, at Walsh.
Okay.
And she asked a question about her weaknesses. So she says, good question. Why would I share what are my weaknesses? So is the SWOT analysis something you share with someone, or is it just something you're doing for your own introspection?
You do it for both, because someone's going to ask you, so tell me, what are your weaknesses and how are you dealing with them? And I think you want to be able to answer that question. And the goal is to create a narrative that is complementary to what you're capable of doing and to what you're not capable of doing. Some of your weaknesses are going to be weaknesses that you can actually work on. Some of your weaknesses are going to be weaknesses where you may need to hire out for that. Yeah. And being able to know, or in the situation where you think about in the workplace, it's finding somebody that can complement where you're weak, to partner with, can be a great way to help kind of stave off any of your weaknesses coming out or being exposed, so to speak. So
they can help you with blind spots, basically, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly.
It's really hard to look at yourself and say, "Oh, well, these are my weaknesses," because I think we turned a little bit of a blind eye to that, because it's hard for us to see what those are. But sometimes having a trusted friend, mentor, colleague, coworker, somebody who's an advocate for you to help you out can really be beneficial to that process.
Exactly. Right. So that if you want to, actually what the question that Rasha just asked allows us to kind of go into. So if you want to go to the next slide.
Sure.
Please.
I kind of got us off track a little bit.
No, this is good. This is a good conversation.
After this, or do you want me to stay on this one?
Actually, so this one, I just want to quickly go over this one. So this slide is meant to kind of give you an idea about where you need to start. So you know that there are internal issues that kind of deal with you or your company. You want to know what those are. Then there are the external issues. Obviously, we were talking about COVID-19. We haven't even begun to think about how supply disruptions may be affected, how it's going to really limit how issues with mass hysteria, people panicking. All the things that can happen are things that you have to think about how it's going to affect your business and what it's going to do to you in terms of trying to drive revenue and ultimately earn a profit. So, and also you got to think about what happens with people who are going to be suffering in the numerous ways that you can think about, emotionally, mentally, financially. Those become factors that you have to consider as well. So with that, I just wanted to give an idea. I only list 5 because it's just to kind of get people started, simple, easy. So now if you want to advance to the next slide. Okay. So the next slide here, I began to give you an idea. I didn't want to go too deep because when you do a SWOT analysis, if you're doing it correctly, it's a little bit of the thing where you just have to work on it for 25 minutes, walk away. Right. And then come back and do it again. But what this is what they call a modified SWOT analysis, or what they call a TOWS analysis. And so really TOWS is just the words from SWOT just backwards. But what you then begin to do is you begin to take those strengths and you begin to see how they work with everything else, the weaknesses, how they work with everything else. So as you can see here, what you have is you take your strengths and you add them to the opportunities. So you see I have core competencies, and then you add that to demand for new talent. And the reason why you do that is you're trying to create a narrative. So I might have core competencies. So I should back up a little bit. The strategy is for a person to complete a career change into the HR profession. So as you can see, you may have core competencies that you identified in HR, and then you also found out that there are opportunities for demand for new talent in HR. So you take those two and you add them together. You recognize that there are certain things that you have that are relevant for what they need in this profession, and you begin to make it so that you send out your resume, you get to know people, you network, you go to some of the conferences that they have, and that begins that whole process with you starting to see what you can create with that. Now, if you notice here, the weaknesses, for example, now you might have core competencies that may help you do some of the basic and maybe some of the intermediate level things in the profession that you're taking from another profession, for example. So what you end up doing is you now say, well, you know what, well, I am unfamiliar with the profession. I know what HR is. I don't know what the actual functions are. I don't know how it works within an organization and what the actual role is. And so you begin to ask those questions, what don't I know about human resources that I'd like to know? And then you begin to build up and break down, where you are with all the things that relate to making some key decisions on how you begin to answer those questions. And so in this one, you see the weaknesses plus opportunities. So a weakness, for example, is no professional certifications. But at the same time, the growing companies are in need of HR professionals. So if you have a smaller company, for example, that's willing to take a chance on you, that could be an opportunity for you to begin to get started in that field. However, it may play against you at the same time. And so you want to begin to at least look at these and begin to ask even more impactful questions about, okay, all right, so I don't have this field, but what would they be willing to start off with? I could add another one and say, for example, down in the weaknesses and the threats, for example, you could say that, well, no professional certifications, unfamiliar with the profession. You can add two of those to the weaknesses and threats area, and then say that, in the threat that really could be impactful is that, it might be a lower salary initially. So if you want to think, okay, am I making the right decision and wanting to go into this field if I have to kind of pay my dues initially, so to speak? And you just want to begin to think about that because it becomes a way for you to know what you're getting yourself into without walking in blind and not being smart. And so the goal of this is to make it as exhausting as possible with ideas. Who had a little bit of a
exhausting and exhaustive, because this is heavy stuff, Scott. This was reminding me of my MBA right now. I was like, wow,
exactly. Yes, exactly.
It's pulling me back into the day there. But I think these conversations are valid for any of us to have. Whether we're an employee, whether we're thinking about interviewing, or we're a manager or a leader of a company, we should be thinking about these things.
Exactly. Yep. And so I think a lot of I think when they started the SWOT analysis, I think it was a guy. I think his name was Albert Humphrey. He was a management consultant that started the SWOT analysis, and I believe he was at Stanford University, and the goal was or Stanford Research or something like that. I think it's something that's associated with Stanford, and the goal was just to do something that was exhaustive, so you can think thoroughly about all your decisions, so that you know exactly where you are. And it wasn't meant for you to have paralysis analysis.
Right.
It's meant to help you begin to think about, how do I take action on everything I'm learning so that I can move on and discover and measure how I'm doing. It's very simple. If you're having success, you measure that. If you're not doing well and you're failing, what are you learning from that? And then you begin that whole process. You start all over again, and it becomes a very you want it to be a fluid conversation.
Right.
Very fluid.
So we've got maybe about 10 or 15 minutes left here, Scott, and I know you've got a couple more slides to go through. Do you want to open this up for the community to have some conversation right now, or do you want to continue to go down the path of slides? What would be your preference at this point?
And I'm a yes and man, so can we yes and also go through and talk to them? Because the next slide is going to be something that's going to be, see, the thing that's beautiful about the SWOT analysis and the matrix that they use is that you can just put anything that you want into it. And when you have something that gives you that kind of flexibility of a framework, it creates some opportunities that people had never ever considered before. So this is something that I learned just along the way when you're reading and you're learning, and a bunch of ideas are just coming and being thrown your way as you're reading and learning these ideas, either through our MBA as we keep attesting to, but also just through some of the reading that you go through as well. And so this is something that they use in the management consulting industry. And what I like about the management consulting industry is that they can literally take somebody who earned a degree in psychology and turn them into an extremely astute business person. And the level of business acumen that they learn from the management consulting industry is just astonishing. And everything is always done in terms of, defining the problem. As you see here, this framework that's here is really just the way that they use to define problems that they have. And that's really what it's about. And defining the problem is really kind of a unfair way, because sometimes you're looking to solve a problem, but you're also looking to identify opportunities. And you want to get extremely good at that. And the reason why that's important is if there's anything you want to make sure that you do extremely well, is defining the problem. If you can master the art of defining the problem, you are more than halfway there. What's fun next, and you remember this part from the hypothesis from when we were learning everything we could from the QM 515, or which is now QM 20. It is about forming a hypothesis, and what you use is an issue tree to help you. Dang, was that a drink? I feel like I feel like I need to go get a drink myself now.
It's like squirt. It's nothing really exciting. I am drinking it out of. It looks like it could be like a fun adult beverage, but it's in.
I wasn't thinking drink. I was just thinking like, I'm like, I probably should go get something to drink, but maybe we can do that.
I'm sorry. Like some. I don't drink that often. Every now and then I'll have a martini. I'll tell you. And it's definitely been the last 7 days have been martini worthy. I had one. You got to figure out. My husband drinks beer. He's a craft beer. I think he's joining on. I'm not sure if he's on Facebook Live or on LinkedIn Live. I'm going to put up the Facebook link on here.
Okay.
If he's on, I'm going to encourage him in the other room to say hi. And if anybody else is joining us on Facebook, to do the same. But no, I just it's just. They're saying right now too we should be drinking water and drinking a lot more fluids and everything too. And I'm like,
exactly.
I'm just going to keep a squirt or an iced tea or an ice water
or something around. Exactly.
Or martini. I mean, whatever.
Whatever hurts. Whatever works, right?
Yeah. But I love this matrix, and I think about this. And any of you who are joining right now, if you're in the consulting field, drop us a comment. And for those that joined us a little bit late, let us know where in the world you're joining us from as well. But I love this kind of circle here, because it meant something in the class when you had to memorize it. But now that I'm an independent consultant, it definitely means something different. When you're going through the process of actually working with a business, and they might come to you and say, I need a marketing plan. But really, you need to. That's not the problem. The problem isn't they don't have a marketing plan. The problem is what? It's sales, it's competition, it's company growth. Exactly. There's a lot of market forces at play, and you got to kind of walk people through that process. So, what I've always enjoyed about working with you, Scott, is that you've always been a very strategic thinker, and you do take a step back, and you kind of challenge people to think about, well, what is really the problem here? And you're taking us through that process right now. So kind of a neat exercise to go through. Are you still there, Scott? Did we lose you? I don't know. Scott, can you hear me talking? I can see you nodding your head, but I can't hear you talking right now.
Right.
Oh, there you go. Okay, you're back. I think we might have had a little hiccup there.
Yeah, no, it's okay. That's all right.
All right. Go ahead, Scott. Do you want me to advance to the next slide, or do you want to keep going here?
No, actually, I'm going to say a couple more things here, because I think it's important to help people understand that if there's anything that you want to make sure you do with any kind of problem that you're solving is number one, make sure you're defining the problem accurately. Not too narrowly, though, but enough for where you can say that what you've arrived at lets you go on to the next thing, which is to then formulate a hypothesis, then you test it. Then once you determine that what the hypothesis is, whether it, if you test it and you recognize that you need to change it, then you make the changes that are necessary, then you evaluate the results. But the number one thing I want to emphasize is that you want to make sure that you define the problem properly. So if you want to go to the next slide.
Sure. That's advanced.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Another couple of questions and comments come in. Pam, I just want to say welcome, Pam. Thanks for joining us. Pam is watching while Cloroxing her kitchen counters yet again. So it's a nice diversion.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah. Tell me about it. Yeah.
And I like Pam, that it's a nice diversion, because as part of I'm like, do we still want to do this tonight, Scott? And I'm like, no, I think it's still relevant. I think it is creating a nice diversion from watching the news and being on social media and hearing other things. But it's nice to think intellectual about something in a different way than what's going to happen this week, right? So go ahead.
Exactly. And it really helps to be completely aware. So earlier, I mentioned value proposition, and I mentioned the 4 words that are listed here. And so when I'm meeting with students, I try to make it so that I get into the habit of saying something about the task analysis. And I can't claim this is something that's original to me. It's something I got from ONET Online. And what it does, it just talks about, what a person's talents, abilities, skills, and knowledge are. And you want to be able to talk a little bit about that. And what's great about this, again, remember that the SWOT analysis is really a framework that you can really dump ideas into. And you can dump this in there. You can say, so what are the strengths of my talents? What are the strengths of my abilities? What are the strengths of my skills and things that relate to that? And then go and do the same thing for the weaknesses as well. And if you really want to do it, just do a SWOT on your talents, a SWOT on your abilities, a SWOT on your skills, and a SWOT on your knowledge. Because I think the thing is that you want to be able to be as creative and imaginative as possible. It's important to ask the questions that scare you, so that those same things will dare you. I guess that's my current comment.
That's really good. I like that.
That's my corny comment for the day. If my kids were in here, I'm sure they would roll their eyes. But
repeat that again, could you, Scott?
Okay, so ask the questions that scare you, so you can do the things that dare you.
Okay. I'm going to put that up on screen. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. So the reason why you do that is that it's about getting in touch with what you're capable of, because your competition, regardless if it's a profession or regardless if it's a business that you're competing against, you have to know where and how you add value, and you should be able to say that. Now, there's a guy by the name of Michael Port. He wrote a book that right now is like escaping me. And it was funny. I think there's a stack of books here that I would want to access, but I'm sure that every book that's on top of the book that I'd like to get to would knock all the other ones down. So I won't even do it. But Michael Port is one of those guys who gives you the words to say, so that you can say what you need to say in just 1 or 2 sentences, just to let people know how you can help. And it's even more valuable when you talk about how you help people and what you do for them. And if you can have a conversation with people like that, I think that really helps them understand, where you're coming from, so that, they know, hey, I help people use LinkedIn to help them get the jobs that they're looking for, meet the people that they want to meet, and to help them create some opportunities for themselves that they may not have been able to before they even had this type of a tool. Yeah. And when you can say something that simple and that powerful, it should give you oodles upon oodles of opportunities, as I put my pinky up for the Dr. Evil look, what I mean? And so that's a little bit of what you want to do. You want to make sure that you're meeting people, you're letting them know that you can help them, whether it's with what your business is and what you can do, or maybe you can help them make an introduction to somebody that they want to meet. When you think about what you're doing, Brenda, and using LinkedIn as a tool to help create things and make things happen, it's highly powerful, and you need to make sure that you continue to show and tell and talk about your message, because some of the things that you've helped me with and some of the services you've offered have allowed me to do some things on LinkedIn that I never thought I can do. So that's my shameless plug for the value of your service.
But I'm always thinking, when I first went on my own too, I was thinking, well, I'm not going to only specialize in LinkedIn, even though that was my
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Because I didn't want to put all my eggs into one basket. So I was doing marketing consulting and social media management and LinkedIn, speaking training. And now it's I realized this year, this is the year for LinkedIn. I thought this was the year for LinkedIn. As it turns out, this is the year of the pandemic. I was wrong.
No doubt about that. Yeah, somebody, yeah.
But in the meantime, I mean, we we can and we should continually invest in ourselves. And,
Yes.
now that many of us are working from home or pulling back a little bit from work, or, if we are small business owners and the business just isn't there, then this is the time to invest, right? Just like in the financial world, Scott, when's the time that you buy stocks? You don't buy when the market's good.
Yeah.
You buy when the market is not quite as strong, because you can get things for a deal.
Exactly.
And this is the time right now to invest in yourself. There's a lot of great tools online, books. I mean, I know I've got some on my shelves. I've already read 2, having a little bit more time right now, but I'm definitely investing in myself, whether it's online courses or, listening to LinkedIn Lives. And, if you guys are following me or other people that are doing lives, reach out and see, do they have a podcast? Do they have a place you can watch past broadcast? And as you're working from home, just play them in the background, and you might get some new ideas from these things, right?
Exactly. Yes. And that's really what it's about. So if you want to go to the next slide, and we can talk a little bit about that. So this is something else, another tool that I think that you can put into a SWOT to help you. And this really, in my opinion, you use this. You can use it for the strengths and weaknesses, but you really want to use it for the opportunities and threats. And so, as you can see, you think about everything that's going on right now. Clearly, the pandemic is going to go into probably political, social, and environmental. Or if you want, you can put ecological. You can interchange those words. Sure. Pestle analysis is just all I'm doing is just taking tools that we've used and learned, and helping people just to put them into a tool that can help you just think about, a little more expansive about what it is that you're trying to do. So
for the who haven't done a pestle analysis, like what I would do is I'm thinking about what are the forces that are impacting my business from a political. So for example, here in the United States, we're going through a presidential election this fall. So the election results could impact my business. So that's like what I would put down. From an economic standpoint, I could say, I know the pandemic is going to have an impact on my local, state, regional, national. The economy as a whole is going to impact me. So it's just more kind of collecting what are all of the things that could impact our business, right?
Exactly. Yes. And so you got to think that during the Obama administration, if you were in the coal business, you kind of knew that was going to go in a direction that was going to go completely against you. If you obviously were a business in your coal business and you're dealing with the Trump administration, you know that there are going to be opportunities that are going to be created for you. And then what's really important though is I'm really helping people out with qualitative type analysis, where you're using words and labels and sentences to describe your situation. But then you also want to still remember to do quantitative analysis too. For example, since the Trump administration has been in office, how many coal businesses have begun to flourish under his situation? And that will tell you a lot. Under his administration, that'll tell you a lot about what happened versus the Obama administration. And that's just a way to look at and see whether or not economically coal has begun to benefit or coal has not been able to benefit. And so that's how you want to use a tool like this, and then put it into a SWOT analysis, mostly in the opportunities and threats. And that's where you want to begin to think about how to literally exhaust what opportunities are there. And you don't have to do this in a single evening. I wouldn't tell anybody to do that. But I would definitely say to do things that relate to just doing it over a period of time. And I'd say it's something that you want to do quarterly just to be on the safe side. And you really should be adding and subtracting and making and make it more so something where you can just go back and see, okay, well, I didn't have pandemic on the list before. Now I'm going to add it now.
It's a possibility. And people have been talking about this for a while. This could be a possibility. This could impact us. The could was always kind of in the air quotes. And and I think we've had little blips of, of other, diseases and viruses and things traveling, but we've never had it to the extent of like, this is now. I don't know about your kids are home now too, right?
Yes, they are. Yep, they are.
And now we're like, okay, now we need to figure this thing out. We need to
exactly
home with them. And then when do we go to the grocery store? And what about work? And many of us are set up for remote work, or if not, we're getting there, right? And Lee Meadows is one of your colleagues at Walsh, teaches management there. He did a great blog over the weekend, and he was talking about the impact of what's happening with the pandemic on the work from home mentality. And before, organizations were so fearful of letting their employees work from home.
Yeah.
Now it's shifting. It's like, okay, we got to get our people at home.
Exactly. Yes. Because if they go on serious lockdown, there is like, they don't want anybody on the street.
No, we don't want a disruption to business. And I think, what I'm kind of sensing from organizations and people is it's starting to tighten. I mean, people like me who have the flexibility, I'm gonna tighten this as quickly as I can, as fast as I can. And then other businesses, it's business as usual, or it's starting to, okay, you have the option of working from home.
Yes.
You need to. And I would imagine by the end of the week, we'll be in a different scenario. And, hopefully we are able to flatten the curve here, but just to be realistic, it's probably going to be the next couple of weeks to a month or more that we're going to have to go through this.
Exactly. And I think the more we think about what to at least try to anticipate, I think the better off we'll be with the approach that we're going to take to, flatten the curve, as they like to say,
right.
And create some opportunities for ourselves in the meantime to stay safe and not get sick and not sicken others as well. So I think that's a lot. So there are a couple more slides we can go through. I think we don't have to stay on them for a long time. But this one right here. So Peter Drucker said the purpose of a business is to create a customer. I always like this one. I think it's if you would add to a profession type of a situation, the purpose of a person in a profession is to create opportunity for themselves and for the organization that they work for. So you can have a dual purpose in regards to that. But every organization, I'm just going to go with the primary three things that every organization is trying to do. They're trying to generate revenue. They're trying to control or lower their costs. And they're trying to maximize intangible and tangible assets. And when I say tangible assets, that means that can be people, that can be equipment, that can be computers. When I say intangible, that can be software, that can be intellectual property, that can be the thinking and the processes that businesses have that they use or that a person has that they use in order to make a difference in the organization or in the business that they're running. And I'm really going to just leave it that simple in terms of what it means, because every organization is trying to either earn a profit or have a surplus or have something of benefit at the end of all the activities that they participate in.
Right.
And it's just something that they just want to remember. And you can still slap this into a SWOT analysis and begin to think about what are the opportunities for us to generate revenue in, say, the Facebook area or in Snapchat area or in other areas that people hadn't considered. And those begin that the goal is just to ask great questions. How are we going to position ourselves accordingly? We just had a competitor buy out, three or four of the companies that we just do business with. How are we going to handle that? Or I noticed that the pay and compensation profession in HR is growing slower than average. And is there an opportunity to position myself as one of the few or get out before they dwindle down to nothing? Because, machine learning and artificial intelligence are doing those jobs with much more efficiency. And so those are the things that you want to begin to think about when it comes to looking at what your role is. And this one is the one I like the most. It's a modification. So a guy by the name of Simon Middleton said he got it from a guy by the name of Alan Weiss, who is both of them are management consultants. But what it was is I just took what they had and modified it for people who were pursuing career goals. And as you can see down in the lower left hand bottom of the matrix, you'll see it says weak career strategy and weak career goals. And then the opposite is it's strong career strategy and strong career goals. And then you're either doing one of the two variations if you're not in either of those. Now, if you have a weak career strategy, weak career goals, you're pretty much you have no clue about where you're going, what you're looking to do.
Right.
And I think very few people can say that they have strong career strategy and strong career goals. And the reason why I say that is because if you say that you have that, that means you're doing exactly what you want to do. You've imagined that world for yourself and you're doing it and you're performing it, making the necessary adjustments as things, even like COVID-19, will cause you to make based on what's going on and how you begin to deal with those things.
Not your employer telling you where you're going to go and when you're going to do things, but you're driving that action.
You could be driving that action, but you still could be doing that with an employer as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are opportunities where there could be where you are working someplace, and the flexibility and opportunity for you are there, and it's just a matter of just saying, what can impact that. Now, if you're doing a SWOT analysis, you're thinking about, okay, so what are the threats to something like this with a strong career strategy and strong career goals? What are the threats? The management can change. The company could be bought out.
Yeah.
You can end up in a situation like Art Van.
Yeah.
And you see how they're dealing with what's going on, and now they're liquidating. And Gardner White is out there touting, to the top of the hills why they're the place to come do business now.
Yeah, I was actually talking to a friend who works for Gardner White over the weekend, and he's a manager there, and they're actually trying to recruit as many of the people from Art Van as they can and hire them because Gardner White's doing so well. And it was really nice to hear that. Well, they were yesterday they were a competitor, but today, you know what? They're all part of the furniture family, and we want to try.
Exactly. No doubt about that. Yeah.
That was nice. Yeah.
Yep. So that with this one, as you can see, there's some questions over there that you can ask. And it all can just really go back into, remember, the SWOT is something where you can put anything into it. It is really like a bag where you can put your treasure in there, or you can put your trash. It's all up to you. And so you have to really think about, what kind of questions should I ask myself in terms of, moving forward and moving in the direction that's going to benefit me, my family, and others who want to align themselves with me career-wise and strategically. But also, you just want to make sure that you get into the habit of thinking about where you are at all times. It's a tough thing to do.
Yeah.
But it is. I think it's something that's necessary.
Awesome. Well, I think we're just about at the hour here, Scott.
Yeah, we are.
I think you had kind of as your last slide in here, any questions from the audience. So I would just like to invite the audience, if you joined us at any point during the broadcast, if you're still watching right now, or even if you're watching this in playback, drop us a comment below. Let us know if you have any questions for Scott about the SWOT analysis process, or just let us know where you're joining us from. I always kind of like to see, sometimes we have people from all across the world that are joining, and we did have a couple more folks that are coming in. Allison said, this was a nice diversion. Thank you, Brenda and Scott. So thank you, Scott.
Tell her she's welcome.
We had Larissa joining us from Warren, Michigan, here in the Metro Detroit. Randall is joining us from New Orleans. I'm sure you have some nice weather down there. We have Bill Fitzgerald joining us from Ann Arbor, who says it's a great topic. He's a longtime fan and user of the SWOT analysis. So I'm sure. Nice. I'm sure, Bill, did you have pandemic on your SWOT analysis at any point?
Yeah, he might have it now.
Why not? He's probably on here now. Rob Adams is joining. I think we may have said hi to him as well earlier. Hamad joined us. Edward says hello. So we've had a variety of different people watching, and I think we're up to about 318 views so far, 26 comments on here. So we'll make sure to drop some links in here later on. And actually, what I want to do right now is I want to put up on screen here the URL for Scott Wyckoff. I'm actually going to remove this from the screen, and I'm going to pull Scott's LinkedIn up on screen right now. We had a little bit of a hiccup, guys, with our StreamYard today. Unfortunately, we had planned on bringing Scott in with video, and he and I joined a little bit earlier here, and we weren't able to make the video connection. So Scott and I do what we do best. We vamped, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We rolled with it.
You just rolled with it.
And we actually got on about 10 minutes before, and we tried this setting, that setting. We tried going into Zoom and doing a Zoom, and it just wasn't working. And I said, you know what? We can still hear you, Scott. And now the pressure's off, and he's in his pajamas over there smoking a cigar. No,
I know exactly.
You can't see him in the background, but there's Scott's profile up on screen, and I would highly encourage you guys to visit Scott's profile on LinkedIn. And Scott, are you open to accepting new invitation requests, or do you recommend people follow you? Or okay, yes, so if you guys do connect with Scott, I would highly recommend that you reference that you watched him on the LinkedIn Live here today. If there's something that was particularly meaningful for you, let him know that. If you felt this was a nice diversion and theme to bring into current events, let him know that as well. And I know, Scott, I'm taking you away from your family for a little bit. Maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. Sometimes.
No. Actually, they're sitting here with bated breath to begin speaking again.
Are they? I do have them all like, shh. Like,
Yeah, no. Everybody's walking around.
and your kids and my kids they're a little bit older. It reminds me of remember that guy, was it like CNN or something? That guy was like talking he was talking about financial markets, and the little baby came in the room behind him
Yes.
on the walker. You know, and ours don't do that anymore, but we still have every now and again I'll do one of these broadcasts and somebody's dog will bark in the background or cat will
Yeah,
walk
exactly. Yes. No, they
like
went through the necessary moves and sound eliminations to remain
Great.
quiet in the background. So
Yeah.
it was
Well,
pretty
in closing, guys, I just want to say thank you, Scott, for joining.
Thank
Scott,
you,
you're
Brenda.
awesome. I really appreciate it. This was a good intellectual conversation. It was a nice break from my weekend.
No doubt about that.
No, it was really nice to have this conversation and chat with you. And I want to just thank all of you who are watching this, whether you're watching this on LinkedIn, whether you're watching this on Facebook. I'm going to put this on YouTube later, so you might be watching this on YouTube as well. Wherever you're watching it, please give this video a like, drop us a comment as well. And then if you'd like to learn more about my upcoming LinkedIn Live series, check out mellermarketing.com/subscribe. And when you subscribe to my e-news, I'll send you an email like once or twice a month. I'm not spamming you every day, but
Exactly.
I will let you know about upcoming broadcasts. And then again, you know, definitely check out Scott on LinkedIn. I'm going to put his URL up on the screen here as we sign off for today.
One more time.
Any final comments, Scott, before we sign off for today?
You know, I think it's just important to it's fun, it's kind of funny. My doctor said that you really have to just be responsible with what's going on, and I think with if we're going to make it through something like this, honestly, it's about people, you know, maybe staying home and following what the instructions of the CDC are, and just using that to at least help us get through this in a manner where the minimal amount of issues and quote unquote damage and death can occur. So it's hard to fathom that, but yeah, the goal is to flatten the curve, right? So let's see what we can do to get that going. And then in the meantime, don't forget to add pandemic outbreak and with the epidemic to your list of things to concern yourself with your business, because this is amazing to think about. This is just truly incredible. But
yeah, and what I heard too, and what I've been thinking about too, is as we have this conversation, Scott, is it's not too late. If you haven't had it as a part of it, well, now you need to think about what is the next 3 to 6 months or the rest of the year look like for your business, and what do you need to prepare for as well.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Because who knows? I don't even want to know what's going to. Hopefully, it'll be a bunch of lottery winners or something. You know?
Yeah, right.
I mean, something. Goodness gracious. So,
Yeah.
It's Brenda, again, thank you very much for the opportunity. I hope I was able to educate your audience. And if they have any more questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll be glad to talk with them.
Awesome. Well, Scott. And with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off here for tonight. This has been Brenda Meller with Meller Marketing. You've joined us for another installment of Social Media Pie, where I bring in inspiring people to inform and educate you. And have a great week, guys. Make sure you wash your hands, stay in the house, social distancing, and help to flatten the curve. And we'll see you guys all soon. Take care. Thanks.
All right. See ya. Thank you.